Hello, good afternoon, and good morning to some. So grateful to have you all here today. My name is Dominique Miller. I am the co-director of Spire and Base here with my colleague, co-director Seth Beatty. Inspire and Base is a place where the two of us do work that supports learning, research, and strategy that advances equitable practices in community development, arts and culture, and creative placemaking. And again, appreciate you all for making time to attend. This is the second of a series of four webinars that we're doing with our partners at ThirdSpace Action Lab. The last one we did was sharing some research that we had conducted around the state of housing justice partnerships. And in that space, we talked a bit about how housing folks work with folks in movement work, what it takes to have those partnerships, how to sustain those partnerships. Um, and it's a bit of a different topic, but the reason it relates is it's really talking about how do we work together to advance community? How do we work together collectively to get to the desired outcomes that we want to see in our own neighborhoods, but also at large? And it also connects with this importance of working together. Um, Community change work is ongoing and has been ongoing. And while continuing to do the work, whether it be around affordable housing, food access, community organizing, et cetera, we're having to continue to do that work while also contending with what's happening at a national scale and someplace at a state scale, dealing with uh, how our government is at large is reacting to things that we're supposed to hold the government accountable around Voting Rights Act, around Fair Housing Act. We're having to look at folks dealing with redistricting and trying to essentially strip Black voters of their power in certain parts of the country. We're seeing ICE occupations. We're seeing a lot of stuff that's going on at a larger scale while also continuing the day-to-day work that we're trying to do in our communities. And so underneath all that, again, is the importance of working together and also working across sectors and continuing to dig into what that takes and what that looks like. So today we're going to particularly talk about accountability. When we're doing community change work, whether it be preserving community, strengthening community, revitalization efforts, it's important to consider who's driving that work. Is that work being driven by those that have stake in these neighborhoods, stake in the communities? Is it being driven more by outside actors, large corporations, et cetera? But however that work is being done, thinking about how do we hold folks accountable who are integral to those efforts. It's whether that be residents, whether that be nonprofits, whether that be local government. Um, how do we hold ourselves to a standard of shared values, shared goals, shared desired outcomes? And what sort of infrastructures can be put around accountability to make sure that those doing this work are held accountable for um, what comes out of it and how communities are impacted. So that's kind of what we're going to dig into today with our awesome panelists that we'll get to hear from later. We'll do a few more just introductions before we delve into the panel, but really want to thank our folks at ThirdSpace Action Lab again for making this content possible and partnering with us on this. And also want to thank our other partners with the Jackson Forward Collective, who we talked to and who came up with this idea for this topic as they're continuing to, just like we're all continuing to deal with some of these things that we're seeing occur on a national level, while again centering community change and just again thinking about how do we hold ourselves accountable to achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve. So with that, I will pass it over to Monica Copeland to share a little bit with you all about the People's Practice Initiative that these webinars are part of, and also a little bit about Third Space Action Lab.
Thank you, Dominique, and thanks everybody for joining us. This is just a warm welcome on behalf of Third Space Action Lab. For those that are not familiar with Third Space, Third Space is a Black-owned, women-led grassroots solutions studio. It's based in Cleveland, Ohio, but the work we do is both local and national. We also have a physical third space. I want to put that out there because some of us know us for our reading room, the Third Space reading room, which is a bookstore, a Black-owned bookstore. But largely our work has been around racial equity and community engagement. And part of the work that we're doing is something called the People's Practice. And so that work has been funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and it's multi-year, multi-strategy initiative focused on anti-racist community development. And our target audience has been practitioners all across the country who are doing anti-racist work within community development or wanting to do more or kind of sorting through that. And so what we want to do is provide resources, resources, tools, and inspiration. The webinars are one form of it. We have resources on the website. But one component that's going to be lifted up today, for example, has been our work on the ground. And so the people's practice in ThirdSpace has also been in place, working side by side in three regions of the country. Our first foray into what we call regional action planning was in Jackson, Mississippi. And so in 2025, we spent 5 weeks working together with what is now the Jackson Forward Collective, sharing what is anti-racist community development, the framework, status quo versus ARCD, and also, dominant narratives and different things and kind of coalition building on the ground and seeing what the group wanted to do. We also have been in the Midwest, so Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then we're going to be heading into Appalachia this summer. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted to share, like when you hear later Jackson Forward and things like that, it's all connected and tied to the project because we've been physically working with these groups on the ground. And we want to work with you all too. So definitely we'll put our website, and I think it's on the side. And yeah, look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Monica. Asia, would you mind jumping on a little bit and just sharing a little about Jackson Forward with folks?
Oh, let me unmute here. Hello, everybody. I'm Ada Simone. I'm the project administrator for Jackson Forward Collective. And I think Monica gave a great segue into how Jackson Forward Collective became a thing. It's definitely a baby of the regional action planning that ThirdSpace did here in Jackson last year. And they basically put us together to tell us about the anti-racist community development theology, letting us know, really coming to us like, hey, this is what we've done, this is what we researched. How can this work for you, for organizations in Jackson? And a lot of us, it really resonated with us. And so it's been a year of us meeting during those 5 weeks of regional action planning. And we continue to meet, we continue to conspire together, continue to build and really figure out how this anti-racist community development could really benefit Jackson. And we're about to formally become a nonprofit titled the Jackson Forward Collective. We're about 20 members strong across the ecosystem. We have those who are developers, we have CDFIs represented, we have nonprofits represented, we have business owners represented, residents and neighborhood leaders. And so we're just excited to see, what Jackson Forward can be, especially in this time in Jackson where we have a lot of new energy with a new mayor, new administration. We have a lot of excitement, but with this current administration federally, there's still a lot of tension as well. Jackson, we already know the deep roots, civil rights wise and movement wise, that Jackson has. And Jackson is known for being resilient. We're known for having to pull through under pressure, pull through without federal support, pull through despite systemic racism. And so this group, Jackson Forward, is just opportunity number one for us to heal and deal from the trauma that we have. I feel like there's a lot of organizations that don't really center our culture when it comes to Black and brown people in the work that we do. And I see Jackson Forward as an opportunity for that, but also a way for us to collaborate and bolster each other's projects that we already have in the works, as well as hold our city and federal government accountable when it comes to community development. Jackson is very siloed. There's a lot of great experts, a lot of great people in Jackson, but we don't do well of taking the blinders off and really sitting in space together to figure out how can we really collaborate in an effective way. And so I look forward to Jackson Forward kind of being a small microcosm, an example of that working across the ecosystem, pulling everybody in, not just working with institutions, not just working with organizations, but bringing in our residents, our business people, our financial institutions, like really learning from everybody across the ecosystem. So that's what I'm most excited about, and what really resonates with me about ThirdSpace and the People's Practice Anti-Racist Community Development Theology.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Asia. So with that, we will move, I think, into our panelist conversation. We will do a Q&A after, so definitely encourage folks to just jot down any questions, notes, etc. But this is also just meant to be conversational. I think a space to just ask questions, learn from each other, share with each other. As I think what you described, Asia, resonates, I'm sure, with so many folks. And just really, again, approaching this from a human-centered place. Like this work is deeply personal for likely all of us. A lot of us do work in live in the places that we're talking about or working in. So, um, and just it's again, it's just a lot of it's just related to just stuff that we're very passionate about. So, want to invite folks to not feel like you've got to be polished or super formal, but again, just conversational and an opportunity to hear from folks from different parts of the country that I think are approaching accountability in different ways. So it'll be really cool, I think, to just hear some of the different ways to think about it because there's a good variety. So uh, let's jump into the panel. Um, so just want to start off asking y'all if you could each share just a little bit about yourselves, the community that you work in, the work that you do, and how accountability does show up in the work that you do. And I would like to start with Krista.
Hey, everybody. My name is Krista Stoneham. I'm the president and CEO of the Houston Land Bank. If you're not familiar with that model, it is a government nonprofit created to activate vacant, abandoned, dilapidated properties and to insinuate just property value, which is why we're called a land bank as opposed to a traditional financial institution. My background is in architecture and community development and urban planning. Have served in different capacities of fundraising, community engagement, stakeholder advocacy, probably a different unicorn of different hats over the series of my career. And in terms of accountability, I'm very grateful in terms of where I am right now to have my personal and professional mission align in terms of how do we create intentional solutions for neighborhoods. Specifically, we focus on Houston and have recently expanded to Harris County with a vision of serving the entire region of Houston, which is comprised of 13 counties. So regardless of if it's rural or urban or suburban, we really help to hone in on creating those solutions in alignment with neighborhood goals. In particular, for example, we have a neighborhood advisory council that helps weigh in and score on the developments of when builders bring proposals to us. That has been institutionalized into our process. We also do a lot of design visioning sessions in order to understand visually, but also mathematically on the metrics and data centered approaches of how do decisions get made, and then seek to really educate them on what's possible, but without necessarily killing their dreams or visions for aspiration and change on the neighborhood scale. We also believe in accountability of just being transparent publicly by sharing our environmental records, for example, because we also are a brownfield city and we specialize in environmental remediation because we're a city without zoning. We're an oil and gas city that was founded off the port with major industries as well. So happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Krista. Anybody want to jump in next? Or I can pick somebody. All right. How about you, Ryan?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Ryan Curran, Director of Housing, Land and Development for Race Forward. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I use he, him pronouns. I work for Race Forward, right? We're a national intermediary, and I've been around for about 45 years. I'm really carrying the baton of the civil rights movement and kind of being a political home for folks to kind of come and make meaning of um, whatever crisis is occurring or whatever opportunities can be seized to kind of advance the movement for racial justice. And I'm, that it's absolutely honored to work with an incredible community of racial equity practitioners, both in government, where we support folks in doing housing, land, and community development planning, but also in grassroots community-based organizations who are leading different campaigns and kind of long-term political education and advocacy efforts. And then also mission-aligned housing and finance, like development folks, kind of who are bringing both the capital and the kind of the development skills to, bring a community's vision to to fruit. We have different accountability structures. I think one of them is just simply having kind of brain trusts and advisory groups that that guide the direction that we put our resources and our attention, both in all three of those sectors, right? So whether it's folks in government or folks in grassroots groups, or in mission aligned housing and finance. And those are the kind of the lifeblood. They're the central nervous system of the networks that we help to set up. And that's kind of our role, is just being a convener, a making sense of what's going on and doing that collectively to create resources from and for the field. Um, we provide different analytical tools, or narrative and communication strategies, and just try to bring a bigger set of tools so folks can feel like they are skilled up and have the capacity to make the change in their communities, right? Like we are just trying to bring more kind of wind in the sails, right? And bring more people onto the rug so that they can't yank it out from under them. This last year and a half of attacks from the federal government have been an opportunity to really help sharpen people's analysis of kind of what the legal landscape looks like, and what's truly under attack and what is more just an attempt to have a chilling effect. And also narrative strategy, like continuing to make the case why, and especially in my work, why housing justice is a racial justice issue, and why racial justice is so critical to having a multiracial functioning democracy, and just being clear that like all of these attacks are really attacks on democracy. So that's just a little bit about Race Forward, and kind of how we hold ourselves accountable, and to the work we're trying to do with the broader movement for racial justice. And I'll pass it to Justin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Ryan. Justin Merrick, here in Memphis, Tennessee, originally from the DMV area, particularly a peninsula of Black beachfront neighborhoods. And I lift that up just because my lived experience comes from neighborhoods that had full autonomy of the things, they were self-determining around things like the opening of the beach, and making sure that we would do a ceremony and ritual that integrated African American experiences with traditional American experiences, and I had a really rich cultural upbringing. And that work has taken me to Memphis, Tennessee. So I always say, I refer to DC as America's made in chocolate city. And for those who don't know, DC, through Marion Barry, was named Chocolate City, and Marion Barry is originally from Memphis, Tennessee. And now Memphis holds to be the largest Black metropolitan area per capita in the nation. And so I don't think any of that's by mistake or happenstance. I think that's just what I feel called to do to help support and bring into fruition what it means to work in proximity with communities that are often left on the margins. And so in Memphis, the work that we do, Memphis, the work that we do is Center for Transforming Communities. I serve as the executive director there and the CEO for Common Table Health Alliance. We look at the pathways of interventions through health, of course, social determinants of health, but really like how are we doing and supporting neighborhood voice to having an authentic, space. And that just really is about power, and where power is and where power isn't, and how decisions are made and where decisions are made. And so that's really how accountability shows up in our work. We currently have a table of land trusts. We helped to start the first land trust here in Memphis. We now have a table of land trusts from 5 neighborhoods that have over 300 properties acquired, which I thought was the largest Black land trust, but I found out recently that maybe it wasn't. So I won't give that statistic. I was on a call with Brother Ed Whitfield the other day. He gave me some references for some other spaces that we need to look into, but really proud of that work, and setting up what I would say is a solidarity economy and a mutual aid ecosystem that's grounded around housing and health, and really what it means to be well in our society. So accountability specifically shows up for us, I think, in looking at where harm has happened and being aware of that and acknowledging that, and then finding ways to lean into the pathways that those who have been harmed support. And so often I find that we play the role, we're very amphibious, the organization where we are the ones that are working as the intercessors between the bridge, between multiple different sides. We say that we're amphibious, and being able to work and swim through institutional spaces, but also show up on the ground as full communal folks that are helping to connect the dots with the intended outcome is to how we bring more resources into our neighborhoods that are often left out of those conversations. I will pass it to Kristen Fukushima.
Hi, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to all the other panels. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Fukushima. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Little Tokyo Community Council. We are based out of downtown Los Angeles, in California. I am currently in Vegas. In the spirit of what Dominique said of being more casual, I'm in Vegas right now for BTS. So if you're BTS Army, let me know in the chat. But yes, I have been working in Little Tokyo for almost 20 years. I am both fourth generation Japanese American and also fourth generation Angelino, Southern Californian. So I think me and my family, we've always been involved in the Japanese American community, although not necessarily Little Tokyo, but it's a place I really wanted to get more involved with when I was in college. So I started doing internships and then started working after graduation and kind of never left. But I think that for a lot of us in the community, not just Japanese Americans, Little Tokyo is really seen as a home place. It's not a place where people necessarily live. We have only about 5,000 residents, and that's really in part to a lot of the housing being destroyed, both during World War II and then also redevelopment in the 70s and 80s. But it continues to be this home place for the community where people look for culture, community, identity, festivals and celebration, convening, all of that. And of course, like food, shopping, and all the fun stuff. Our Little Tokyo is 142 years old. We say we were established in 1884 because that is when the very first Japanese-owned business opened up. And I know that in the context of like the country or the world, that is not very old, but in LA, that actually makes us one of the oldest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And then today, Little Tokyo is one of the last few remaining Japan towns in the country. And there's only actually 3 recognized in the state of California. It's San Jose, San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. And I say all that because I think it really speaks to resiliency and the fight that our community has had for generations to make sure that this place continues. We always joke that we are just like very stubborn people and we don't know how to like stop or give up. But it's really that like love for community, love for place and neighborhood that I think has been really the driving force for a long time. Little Tokyo today has about 7 churches and temples, as I mentioned, 5,000 residents, 400 businesses, and then 50 to 100 nonprofits. We love a nonprofit. And that's all within like 2 to 3 square blocks. At one point before the war, it was about 10 square blocks. And then through encroachment, displacement, and other forms of erasure, we have really seen the community dwindle down. And I think that's where we feel like the fight and the urgency is so strong today. So my organization, the Little Tokyo Community Council, was created in 1999, and really with the idea that there was a lot of changes happening in the 90s, and folks realized that there needed to be a place to bring the whole community together. So we are a coalition of the businesses, residents, spiritual institutions, cultural and community organizations, and other vested stakeholders, or folks who call Little Tokyo home, with the understanding that we might not all get along or see eye to eye on things, but Little Tokyo is the bigger picture. And if the neighborhood is not here, if this community is not here, neither are the rest of us, or what does it mean to be the only one left standing? So really thinking about that bigger picture and working together. Our mission is to protect, promote, and preserve the community. And that looks like a lot of, well, frankly, a lot of meetings, but, organizing, mobilizing, talking through issues. We also do a lot of small business support. I think for our neighborhood, we realized that when we talk about displacement, a lot of our residents that would have been most at risk were already displaced in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so today, the residents we still have are luckily in community controlled buildings. So it really is about our businesses who are still renting from, we don't own a lot of our own land because of the Alien Land Law Act that was in California, as well as some other issues. So yeah, we really focus on like identifying what are the folks most at risk or things most at risk and move from there. And then, so I think for accountability, our organization is really based on this idea of accountability being core, being accountable to community and think about what good community process looks like. So that is a lot of engagement, a lot of input, a lot of participation. We really try to make sure that the positions we take as an organization when we speak on behalf of the neighborhood is really rooted in what the community have to say. So it's a very circular, iterative process. It can go on for like an annoyingly long time, but I think it's with the understanding that by having these conversations, folks both feel recognized and heard. They feel like they have the opportunity to participate. And then at the end of the day, when we've gotten through the process and reach a conclusion, there's the understanding that even if they don't agree, they know how we got there. And then that really helps keep the community together. And yeah, I think I can go on about this, but I would just say like self-determination is a big part of how we see our work. We want to make sure we're the ones in the driver's seat for things that happen to and within the neighborhood. And we want to make sure the community is moving together and speaking with one voice, which can only happen from bringing everyone together in the same room.
Thank you, Kristen, and really appreciate just all of that context around history and bringing that up to the present. I think you all gave wonderful context on your work, your organizations, and just where you're at as well. And thank you again for sharing about how accountability shows up in your work. I'd love to just kind of quickly go around and just from each of you kind of hear like why is it important? Like why is accountability even an important thing kind of in your work? And were there any particular like challenges or opportunities that kind of really made accountability feel like a high priority in what you were doing. So let's just start with Justin. You don't mind? Sorry, I know you was mid stretch, looked like you was getting comfortable. But,
No problem.
so just why is it important?
Yeah, why is it important? I have a couple responses to that. So I think that folks understand the value of accountability. Like that's how you're able to move forward with integrity to whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. And accountability for us is the fulcrum. Like we can't move forward if we're not willing to be accountable. What I want to offer the conversation as well, and I'm sure we'll get more time, is I think accountability works in lots of different domains. And so I often tell the folks that I'm working with, listen, so I think understanding and having awareness around who you're speaking to when we're talking about accountability is very important. It means different things to different people. And so I think in traditional workspaces, accountability has a different meaning than what it sometimes may mean in community. And so I often say in spaces where there's been absence of access to power, oppression, right? And where there's a lot may be trauma and where there's a huge desire for healing, accountability is I think can be a fragile space because sometimes it's seen as domination and control. So what I often tell people is that accountability is also how we just hold and govern ourselves accountable to the work. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of times accountability is seeing what somebody else is doing to someone else opposed to what we hold ourselves accountable to. And so what I'd like to introduce into this conversation is what it means to be whole in a space of being healed, to be able to participate actively with the process of accountability. That's really, really, really important, that piece. And the other piece that I will throw out is for us that has led to new vocabulary around honorability. So if we understand that that the goal for our communities is to be able to be whole in the spaces that they're in, it means that historically folks may have been denied physically, economically, spiritually, emotionally, a part where they're not able to bring their full selves. If we understand that the goal and there's agreement that everybody can bring their full selves to the table, then the accountability may be limiting. because honorability opens into a different domain, right? It's like how we want to be as people and showing up, and it brings into the space support, like the level of support that folks need when we talk about accountability. So when we are trying to achieve the outcomes, right? That's we frame that as accountability. What are the goals that we are trying to achieve to move this piece forward? When we talk about how we're doing it, right, we talk about honorability, like how we're holding our brothers and sisters in this walk so that we can achieve it. Two very different things that are very connected. And for us, it's been very helpful to provide some more definition around that so that we can hold folks accountable and that folks will hold themselves accountable to achieve the work. And I'm happy to chime in later.
I'll chime in next. Absolutely agreed with everything. If anything, I want to donate to the collection plate of the way he was preaching Justin. In terms of accountability, it is absolutely the differentiating factor of who gets access to resources after the power or the decision maker makes a decision, right? Especially with my role of activating land, that it absolutely impacts people's quality of life. Who gets access to the property, because we make decisions on what's the maximum sales price. We make decisions on how long it's going to remain affordable in the deed of trust and the legal components of tying to that parcel. And well, in some cases, it could be in perpetuity if we were a land trust, but ours is a 10-year affordability period because we want to give people the option if they want to pull out that equity of whatever they want to do with their family. It helps decide the decisions of where your kids play, where your kids go to school. And obviously, it's no secret about the decisions that were made hundreds of years ago that we're really still cleaning up generations later. So it's what helps determine what good or bad intentions are, regardless of the outcome. It's that middle seat of the system of what really helps move the trajectory forward of whatever impact is attempted to be made, whether it's good or bad. If you don't have the accountability of how you're able to help a community shape their future, or just sit back and watch as someone else is benefiting it because you don't necessarily have a system of how the decisions get made, of how you're able to build or erode trust. It's not biased on positive or negative. You ultimately, once again, are really just being able to kind of be in that middle seat of the system and the infrastructure of the decision maker and how that moves forward in that next step of becoming a tangible asset or an outcome or whatever that intervention is that someone's seeking to move forward on.
I'll jump in. Or Kristen, did you want to go? Yeah. I heard the mention of power, right? And I just want to like center that all accountability structures and practices and principles really are oriented around um, the great imbalance of power in our society, right? Like the when I think of the sector of housing and land justice, the historical root causes around the power imbalances that the real estate interests have in our civic and our public institutions, like the influence they have, the power of corporate landlords, right, to really dictate how people enjoy what is a basic human need, right, their own home. Um, the power and wealth of homeowners and homeowner associations to like, kind of the NIMBY attempt to stop affordable housing or other forms of community development. Like the founding of our country and the kind of the rules that were put into place and by whom were to codify this power imbalance. And so current day work is systems change work, right? It's to change that system so that, every single transaction isn't so concerned, doesn't have to be so vigilant about these power imbalances, right? That the system itself has been corrected for, but in kind of the more transactional, approaches where like a program, or a policy has been won to address or redress harm or to create more affordability and opportunity. The accountability required to like the agreements both in community and in the institutions to ensure that like that program and those policies that are hard fought and hard won that they're implemented with integrity, like integrity to the community vision. And the status quo, all those other power imbalances I already mentioned, that those continue to try to um, take those wins and bring them back to the status quo. I mean, you see it with, whether it's a rent stabilization policy that is slowly eroded to not be effective, or a progressive tax structure. I'm thinking about Measure ULA in LA, right? Like you see the corporate interest coming and being like, oh, let's try to water that down and weaken it, or redirect the funds toward policing or something that is completely not from the community's vision. So the need to go from like this kind of tokenizing or even maybe just like lightly consultative to beyond collaborative, to actually defer to community expertise and wisdom and build community power is part of that, the accountability like the table. We talk about the table a lot, like what table are you setting for governance? Um, but also the process and decision making and like who actually has the power to make the decisions, and what are the kind of, we'll talk about this later, like the actual like mechanisms of accountability. Are there clawback provisions, right? Are there like consequences when if an institution, whether it's government or otherwise, doesn't adhere to implementing with integrity, doesn't adhere to the community's vision for the purpose of whatever the program of policy is. And that's where real accountability comes, is like there has to be some kind of pain point if folks in institutions aren't implementing with um, a true commitment to what the community envisioned.
Great. And then I'll try to keep this quick. I think on our end, as maybe noted in what I said earlier, my context is very like granular and micro, like we're a very small community. So I think for us, accountability in some ways is almost baked into the foundation of it because we're so tight knit. It's really hard to be really shady with someone when you are on the same block as them and you have to like walk back and forth their like storefront all the time, where you go to a family friend gathering and like they're there and like, oh, hello. So just really thinking about that in the context of relationships. And then for me, I always think of accountability is about trust, and trust is about relationships, and how all these really tie together. We also are a community that has a very long memory. So things from the 90s continue to haunt us today. Things from World War II incarceration continue to haunt us today. These are the things that still get brought up. And I'm like, oh, are we still mad about that from 80 years ago? I guess we are. And so just thinking about, with that in mind, how do we be really careful with each other and understand that trust is fragile? It can be easily broken and then take a long time to rebuild. So accountability is really about how we show up for each other, understanding that we are intertwined in ways that go beyond how we might really fully understand until something happens and you're like, oh, it's going to take a minute to really rebuild this. And then just thinking about having tough conversations and then how to really hold those, and understanding that I always think of community as like chosen family. Like it is tough, right? You have like your uncles you disagree with, you kind of want to avoid, but also you are stuck with them. So you have to figure out how to work together and still be in community. And so, yeah, I think for us, accountability is just really about thinking of each other as like a whole and how we move together in these ways. And so it's that like micro granular part of rootedness and community.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And I think what you were saying makes me think of the kind of honorability. Like you kind of got to carry yourself a particular way. So some of that is from being tight knit. But I would say also so much of what I'm hearing too is like you're establishing structures in a way that is culturally relevant to you all as well. And I think that that plays a role too in how you move, and just how you probably are just more naturally empathetic with each other too, having like that shared history. And also what you raised about just like a lot of that, one, there's the historic trauma, epigenetic memory. I think that Asia just brought up, and I think Justin was talking about too, around needing healing as well, and that being a key part of this. But even from a more practical standpoint, a lot of those harms were never addressed, and they remain unaddressed. And so, so much of that work is still trying to do that, as folks that didn't cause it, didn't do it, but now you're trying to fix it or address it. And there's a lot in there, and I really appreciate you, Justin. I think I won't say blowing up the term accountability, but I think it's a good reminder of like for a lot of these terms, there's very like formal ways and formal definitions, and then it's also bringing it back to like us as just like cultural folks or just like how it actually works, especially if you're talking about community led. I think what you're getting at, Ryan, too, about just like work that is really driven by the people, and not necessarily just power holders. So there's a wide variety here again of like accountability process versus like maybe just a particular structure, but love to. I will come back to you a little bit, Kristen, if you don't mind. But would love to just hear with that, what's one thing you think is particularly important to think about when building this infrastructure? Like you talked a little bit about when LTCC was formed, but for folks who might be thinking about um, wanting to create something of that type of kind of like formality, what might that look like? And then for everyone else, what's one thing that's important for whether it even be building an accountability, it might be a process or like in building kind of like this honorability kind of practice? Like, what's one thing that you think people should know about doing that?
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Dominique. Yeah, so maybe just to start with a little bit more about our organization. Our organization was founded at a time where, so for a long time, Little Tokyo was very much like merchant and business run and focused. And our residents tended to be like lower income individuals who didn't have all the access to traditional power or have their voice heard. A lot of immigrants, and it was just like a very different time. In the 80s, 90s, we saw a lot of nonprofits start to form, and then that started to really change the power balance in the neighborhood. And I think ultimately we again realized that we had to work together. There was a lot of threats facing the neighborhood, and the question is really how do we go about that? So I think LTCC wasn't really originally considered to be a coalition. It just really was. We need a space to gather people so folks can hear the same information and really share that and have the ability to discuss it. Something we've learned is folks from the city or metro or developers love to talk to everyone separately because they might share different information or not really see these conversations in tandem with each other. So really saying we want this to happen in a community collective way and hear the information together so that we can then discuss it together. That was really important. And then a place to then discuss and take positions together. The other thing we realized that was really powerful about this model is it really helped level the playing field. There's was an organization that represented our low-income senior residents. And as with our membership structure, it meant that they had one vote, same as the Japanese American National Museum, a arguably much more powerful organization. So thinking about in the context of everyone has the right to be at the table, to have their voice heard, and see this as equal voices in this process, not here at the leadership in one end, and they will make decisions on behalf of everyone else. We, again, love meetings. So a lot of our process is based on a lot of meetings and places for folks to have access to these conversations. I think a learning we had over the years is folks with access, power, privilege, resources, they will always show up. You'll find a way to make sure they're at those meetings. But the folks who don't have that same access or time or ability or whatever to get there are the ones who often get left out. So really thinking about our engagement and how we really look to involve people, really focusing on those margins so that, you know, kind of you think of like a blanket, if you pick it up at the end, you're grabbing everyone. If you pick it up in the middle, you are losing a lot. And so really, how do we focus on the folks that maybe aren't always in those conversations to make sure they are there and part of it, and then bringing that to everyone else. So folks also just have a better understanding of what makes up our community. And it's not just maybe the same people they see in every single meeting, but there's a lot of other people who can't make a Tuesday 2 p.m. meeting because they are working or something like that. And yeah, again, I talked earlier about our process of this like long iterative thing, but again, it can be very annoying for people, including myself. But I've really come to see the power in it, because just being able to talk through our issues together and take it to different spaces and realize there are different perspectives, but they are all really valid. But how do we identify what is best for the neighborhood and for this community, not just one particular interest, and seeing that as the bigger goal and bringing everyone together? It does help with like any splintering or differences that can happen. And we, I think it was Ryan brought up affordable housing. We have had our own challenges with people, some being opposed to affordable housing and some saying, no, this is a really clear need. I think it's only through community dialogue and a collective process and decision-making model that we are able to really work through what actually are the true needs of the neighborhood, and how can something that some people see as a threat actually maybe be seen now as an opportunity. Maybe they didn't think about the fact that their workers might need that housing and want to live closer to this neighborhood. So how this is a full benefit. And I think just the last thing I would say is, let's see here, did I go through all my things? Yeah, I'm talking about divide and conquer. That is really important to me, because I do think that folks go into neighborhoods thinking that they can really just take advantage of it. And it really only is through like organizing and collective power and community being together as like one united voice that we're able to, like, that is our true strength as a neighborhood.
One thing I've recently been accepting is kind of like this call that I just feel in my gut, is moving from being the champion to the coach. I've historically worked with community, listened to them, and they're able to access decisions and transparency records, all the stuff that I kind of briefly shared. But what I really want is for them to be able to go and activate and advocate on their own without me. I'm very mindful of, we're only here physically for as long as God allows us to be. I am only here in this role for allow as God wants me to be, right? And I know that at least I feel like in the beginning of my role, I've been here about 4 years now, I kind of was more of a disruptor, right? Especially because of some of my past experiences in the profession and seeing what it looks like when someone is not accountable. I came in full force. I'm working with community. I'm here for equity work, right? And I'm still very much that, but now I really want to be sure that the systems that I create move, whether I'm CEO or not, whether I'm even on vacation or not, right? To make sure that my team is educated, that my board members are educated, that they have the toolkits, the questions, the resource guides, whatever informational components to help them digest the understanding of the work that we're doing, that is a part of their being and not just a part of their respective role. In addition to the community lens of being able to now talk to your own council member or the Congress representative getting a congressional earmark, and then being able to be an investor, be a builder, be whatever that is in that solution that they want to be, instead of just a partner or a stakeholder conceptually, but they really have no money in their pockets, nor do they have an opportunity to then accelerate just that understanding for their next generation that they're building within their family. So part of that infrastructure, in my perspective, is now sharing some of my insights as a trained practitioner that's been doing this for 20 years. And how do I translate that in a simple form so you're not having to go through all the years of education and debt that I went through, and some of the heartbreak as well, and then them being able to use that as a leap board for what they want to do next.
I can go. When I hear you speak, Krista, of those pieces, what I'm reminded of is, so I see accountability. I had to go back to my accountability bag, y'all. And I feel like that was a journey of like last year and the year before, where I as a leader went through like this huge journey as to what it meant to be accountable and like who I was accountable to. And so one, I would offer that clarity. So when we talk about community development, right? Because I think a lot of us are community development practitioners. What does it mean to be developing neighborhoods or communities, right? And who are we accountable to? There's the CDFI, there's the developer, there is the actual community residents, right? And so there's lots of different folks that we have to be accountable to get this process done. What I've learned is that accountability is on a spectrum. And so you have accountability on one end and support on the other end. And so from a space of somebody that holds power, so I'm also very clear about that. I was reminded when Kristen, when you were speaking around, what was it? I don't know what you said. Power holder. As a power holder, you gave the term power holder, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was reminded I am a power holder, right? With that has positional power as an executive director, which has lots of implications that are often implicit in our work, particularly when we're talking about accountability. So, and I've been fortunate, right, to be one that's often in charge, and I have learned by putting myself in spaces where I'm not in charge what it feels like on the other end. That's what actually helped me with my growth journey, right, and accountability. So I say that because often as leaders, we don't ask the question around like, yes, did you do this? Did this get done? Right? Accountable. But what is the support that one needs? And so Kristen, I think, and Krista both gave examples of folks that aren't holding resources and like what their journey looks like. And so when we try to hold accountability, if it's not coupled with the question of like what support is needed, does that actually cause more harm? And so the mechanism that I also heard Kristen talk about was trust. Like that's the thing that connects accountability to support. And what I've learned is that trust happens in three ways. And we typically only think about one way within systems, like systems change work, within the capitalistic system, whatever it is. And that's usually reliability. We equate accountability to reliability. Did you do the things that you say you were going to do? Did you say the things that you aren't going to do? That's usually where it lands for folks, particularly when you're in a hierarchy, right? Like this is about us moving an objective to get done. When we realize that there's other ways to build trust, because that's the foundation of accountability, right? Is having a healthy system of communication set up. There are other domains that we can be thinking about when we're thinking about trust building. And so the next one was credibility. Credibility is like, yo, is it scholastic experience or is it the lived experience? And so many of us as practitioners have gained the scholastic experience, but we may lack the lived experience that's needed to implement this in a way that has integrity in the community and can take roots. And so that is a spectrum as well, the credibility piece. And when we understand like, oh, I don't have credibility in this space because I may not have lived experience, or I don't have the credibility because I really haven't done the work to break down how many units, right, it takes, or what the CDFI or what the policy work that's needed to do it. That's a way to build trust is through credibility. And the third one, which I think deeply lacks, and this gets into the honorability space that I was lifting up before, is intimacy. Like trust is established through intimacy, sharing things that you typically wouldn't share. So in a lot of workspaces, and I think, Kristen, the reason why I was drawn to something you said is you said you're a small community. When you're in a small community, you can't help but be proximate, which means there's going to be a lot of intimate moments, right? Because so many people are carrying those things. And when we're in larger systems, a lot of times we lose the intimacy element. Like how are we able to say things that we typically wouldn't say in the environment? So that's what I would offer for the piece around accountability, and like I think the specific question was around, let me make sure, was around what we particularly want people to know about building accountability infrastructure. It would be about the trust. Three domains: reliability, credibility, and intimacy.
I love that framework. You tied it all together. That was beautiful. Yeah, as I was listening, I was doing this similar kind of like just listening for kind of the signals from each of y'all. And when we heard Kristen talking about kind of the organizing in the community, it made me think of that the accountability rally cry of nothing about us without us. And you gotta from the visioning to the design to the implementation, there needs to be a role for those most impacted to have real authorized power to influence and direct and benefit from these community development investments and policies. And when I was hearing Krista talk about like the work would continue even if you weren't around, it made me think of the infrastructure for accountability, and that was where I spent some of my time preparing for this, was looking back at like these actual governance agreements between coalitions. And these are coalitions who we've supported to work in like what we call a productive tension with government. So not an adversarial one, right? But like where government has is at least positioned uh, to work in favor of and in support of a community's vision, but there still needs to be this productive tension, this accountability designed in. And so these governance agreements, you read them and they're just these like powerful statements of analysis of power, where the most impacted voices are the ones who are like in the center of the executive committee and are making the decisions, and that there's these guardrails. Um, for not going back to the status quo when you're asked to compromise, because you will be asked to compromise. And you have these bright red lines that you're not going to cross over when you're asked to leave some folks in your coalition behind, right? Like there's a divide and conquer like playbook, especially by local government of like, oh, we'll fund your project, just don't make trouble over here on this policy. And so that there's these agreements around solidarity that you're all in it together, that when written down are this just a powerful kind of grounding tool for your own internal accountability and how you do external accountability. I think those two, and Justin, you mentioned like your own accountability as an organization to each other and to your community, but also like holding institutions accountable. It's kind of those are two different strategies. Um, and then designing in, I just love when I've seen coalitions design in opportunities for more people to get involved, that you never stop organizing. There's this like terrifying quote I heard, um, from some elders who said that like when there was a bunch of civil rights policies, one, that the program that would implement them was where the movement went to die. Like there was so much effort to implement and just kind of bureaucratize it that like people forgot to keep organizing. The next generation of organizers like came up and were like, "What? There's a program. It's good. That's all we need." No, you need to like keep these on-ramps to the political education, the relationship building, the trust building to get that next generation of leaders to join in and kind of again going back to the metaphor we use of the rug, like you want so many people standing on it because they will yank it. Like there will be an attempt to yank the rug out from under. And so just like that ongoing organizing as like a part of your governance and your accountability structure is can be pretty powerful. And it's a powerful antidote to that lesson learned around programs.
You said a lot there. Thank you all, and I do want to try to squeeze in one more question. We were supposed to go to the to the Q&A, but want to kind of hopefully tie it off with this question before we open it up. Please, we'll try to make this kind of like little quick lightning rounds and go around to the degree we can because it is a big question. So I do apologize for that. But it's kind of, I think, tied to just, I think the direction you were going a bit, Ryan, with how do you see the current political climate impacting the need for accountability? We're seeing, kind of what you get, there's direct attacks on all different forms of accountability, whether it be media, um, organizing or labeling folks as terrorists who are engaged in different kind of forms of advocacy, removal of inspector generals, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a lot of attacks on different forms of accountability. So how are you seeing this climate impact the need for accountability, and should we or how should we be thinking about, um, on our end bringing those types of roles into our own work, the things that are kind of being removed and suppressed by the current climate? Small question.
Yeah, this is the question that is being asked and answered constantly. Every time we're convening with partners in the field, like this is the question we have to ask. Is like, how are you both blocking these attacks and continuing to build the just multiracial democracy you want in your communities? And I mean, these attacks are meant to target democratic institutions that provide accountability. Like that is their goal. Elections, transparency, distribution of power, civil rights law, like that. There's a reason they're targeting those areas because they are forms of accountability. Um, and specifically the civil rights, being weaponized against its original purpose, like this whole reverse discrimination, thing is this myth here is a great perversion, right? And so the what's old is, I mean, getting back to kind of what the actual law and like sharpening your pencil and really reading the civil rights laws that are and the case law that are underpinning our work and knowing that we are standing on solid ground, even as they try to weaken it, um, is one step folks are doing. And then another one is just putting everything down in ink. Like no more resolutions, no more kind of just talking points and speeches, like getting really like accountable ordinances and binding agreements with consequences, whether it's your community benefit agreements and your ordinances, implementing, X, Y, or Z, like you really need to get that written and like authorized. States are now passing their own civil rights legislation. You've seen it in California for fair housing and Maryland for disparate impact. Like taking those wins and codifying them in state law uh is where I mean that's where we're at in this time is like those accountability structures need to be localized at this point because they can't be trusted federally.
Can I feel something on your heart? I feel like you were about to say something. No?
You can go. Yeah.
Okay. Um, because I work for a government nonprofit, I'm right in the thick of it, right? Locally, I'm in Texas, right? As well. Talking about helping with environmental justice projects and right? I'm like right in the middle. And I believe that what has helped me, and I know this wasn't the question, but I feel like they go hand in hand of the political climate, but also who am I as I'm leading in this space as well. And it's a combination of bravery and strategy. As sometimes like I kind of briefly mentioned is sometimes I don't necessarily need to be the voice in the room, but I need to make sure that my voice is in that room. So whether it's helping to provide that checklist or talking points for my board chair who is a Jewish man, then that's kind of how I am still influencing some of the spaces without necessarily having to be in that space or finding like right now, I'm seeking to navigate this for Texas legislation for state funding. And I know that I'm going to need someone maybe on the Republican side in order to advocate for some of the policy changes that I'm seeking, comparing other red states like Florida or Iowa and maybe Oklahoma in terms of what are they doing and how you can speak some of that same language, but also some of that patience of just a recent example. It took almost 2 years in order to hold a partner accountable, and we had a contract signed. But because I'm sharing, like, hey, this is actually what it says, and they're like, nah, she ain't talking about nothing, right? So it took other strategies and levers of calling elected officials, calling, and just preparing this. I may need public, or I really want to handle this in the back boardroom. So I wish I had a playbook from the civil rights era, right, that just plopped in my lap. I definitely have taken some advice from some of the elders who were there, and part of it of being this loving force, because I also don't want to respond with anger because I'm realistic about the stereotype that already exists about an angry Black woman. So I don't even really consider it as an attack. I look at it as we're playing chess and you're moving forward on your strategy pieces as I'm moving forward on mine, and I'm going to pull in my rook and I'm going to pull in my knight, but I'm the queen of the board, which means I can move whichever way, right? I'm making sure that I'm flexible and mobile in every aspect of still making sure I'm core to who I am first. Take it personal, but it is very much purposeful to still be at peace in this. Yes, because we already knew what we signed up for when we signed up for this. We didn't know what it would look like in terms of the climate and the aspect of it, but we knew what we signed up for. And it's just finding the other Avengers who have the invisibility cloak and all the other the super rings and all the things that we have in order to really build our forces together. But I think still just making sure you're giving yourself grace and like what I'm saying in a loving way, because I do know that I'm here for a reason. I believe we're all here for a reason. And I believe that the more that we're vulnerable and transparent about what we're struggling with, what we're succeeding with, and how we can once again help coach at least the pieces that we do know and just connect them together as people, we're going to move forward this. I'd really just imagine myself 20 to 40 years from now talking to myself right now, and like what are some of the things that my older version has learned from that with me in my present, but also my past version of just like that radicalness. Now I'm a little bit more calmer, but I'm still very much about this life.
I'll chime in, try to be quick. I know time. I feel like this is a comprehensive question, and I was like, "Oh, how am I going to respond?" And wrap up with what I think was the last piece as well. So three things: on a personal note, on an interpersonal note, and then on a structural note is how I want to respond to this piece around accountability. On a personal note, I was reminded when you said courage and voice in that room. Like my accountability journey is one that also holds power, is making sure that we give credibility where credibility is deserved. So there's a couple things that I said, shout outs to Sister Tawana B and Brittany Bullock around the honorability piece, right? Because if the voices are not physically in the room, how do we bring them to the room, right? That's how we are able to connect. On an interpersonal note, or on a structural note, the work that we do is about building neighborhood democracy. And right now, what was really resonant for me living in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis that is also being redistricted, was a need to not necessarily show up on the front line, as crazy as that sounds. Like it was a need to preserve the work that we've done. So, Brother Brian, you talked about where is it? Productive tension. And I often say generative conflict. And it has taken a lot to be able to get our folks to be able to show up in generative conflict. That's around the accountability. I want to preserve that. I don't want that to disappear where we think we have to go back to what James Lawson names as plantation capitalism, right? But where folks feel entitled enough to be able to show up to challenge these things. And I mean our everyday folks, not the 5% that are on the critical mass that are on the front line. So when I think about like the work, for me, it has gone to like how do I preserve and how do I stretch a little bit thinner to connect beyond this region to make sure that we're bringing the folks in that are going to reinforce and fortify these principles that are not necessarily preserved in dominant culture here in Memphis, Tennessee. So that's my structural response. And on an interpersonal, just a deep desire to stay in loving relationship with folks. And so I think for us to build accountability, Prentice Hemphill said, brother, I haven't met, but I read it and it stuck with me last week. Boundaries are the distance in which we can love someone, love ourselves, and love someone else simultaneously. That blew me away. I'm gonna say it again. Boundaries are the distance in which we can love ourselves simultaneously and someone else. And so for us to create spheres of accountability, we have to understand that that's rooted in productive tension. And if we understand that's rooted in productive tension, we have to have very clear boundaries and understanding where we're grounded from to be able to get there. And what happens is that it gets thinned out when all these other tensions that are external pressures that are coming, where we don't get to practice what it means to be in beloved community. So that's what I offer, is that accountability is grounded in trust, and that loving force that I think Krista lifted up, it's around beloved community and how we hold ourselves first. That's it. I know we have time.
That was so great. Okay, just my things really quickly. One thing I will say in regards to this productive tension, I keep thinking about how in Japanese America, we are very conflict avoidant. It's just like part of our collective harmony of how we work together. So having tough conversations is really hard and not a skill we naturally have. And so I think it's been really inspiring listening to everyone just think about how we continue to push that over here in Little Tokyo to really get people to engage in harder conversations that they would much rather avoid and just like go to their corners and talk some trash. But so on this question, I will start with acknowledging that in California, we are very blue. Um, we're very blue. And so what that means for us is I think when we think about these questions of systemic change or like where we can really make an impact, it helps people really, I think, to go really local. Whether it's about like House of Representative or state legislature or city council, that's really, I think, where folks feel like they can make the most difference in their lives as Californians. One thing that happened during the pandemic is it really, people had time. And so people got really activated in local city government. And that's been really transformative for the city of LA. Got to the point that so many people were showing up to city council meetings that city council now limits public comment because they are tired of hearing from the people and from the community. And so then what that has led to is more and more like next generation progressive candidates have been running for office. And that is slowly changing the makeup and the direction of our city council. And that's been really great to witness that like what that looks like. In LA, unlike places like New York, we are very council driven. We don't have a very strong mayor. So when people in LA are like, where's our Mamdani? It's actually like, oh, we have 15 offices where that is the opportunity, less so the mayoral position itself. And then I think the person I just want to highlight is our city controller. Not typically very like sexy position, like who thinks about the city controller, but Kenneth Mejia has, I think, been really a big model in how to bring public transparency to the wider region, to the point that he's probably the most popular elected official. And no one will say this because they don't want to admit it because he is seen as more radical and progressive. So no one likes to talk about it, but he polls higher than literally everyone else. The last election, he gets like twice as many votes as everyone else. And it's because he does things like, I'm going to put a link in the chat. He will make billboards that just are like, here is the bar graph of how our money is being spent. Youth, like we say, our priorities as a city are parks and education and these things. Well, 90% of our budget is going to LAPD. Is that reflective of our priorities as a city? And so his commitment to transparency and openness and like really being able to engage the public in what our city government is doing has built a lot of trust in him, and then also really opened people's eyes to like it doesn't have to be a mysterious thing that we cannot comprehend of like how our city works. Like if we get the right people there who make it legible, then we can really work together to make our city a better place. So yeah, I think I would end with that.
We have to hold ourselves accountable to the fact that Dominique and I plan these things, and then we have really rich conversations and we run out of time and we don't allow sufficient time for actual interaction with participants. So apologies for that. Hope that this has been a really rich conversation. So many pearls of wisdom. So incredibly appreciative of everything our panelists offered today. I should note, in the absence of us being able to take audience questions, there are a whole range of resources available on the People's Practice website. This is really a movement that's about trying to shift community development in a completely new direction, a direction that in some ways we have never gotten to witness, to be explicitly and affirmatively anti-racist in the way we approach community development work across the United States. And we wholeheartedly believe this is a possibility. It just takes practice. And we invite folks to stay with us for this. There will be additional webinars we're doing, but there are a range of other resources that you can use, including research. We're hearing a lot of people are using this in their case making and their grant making as references for work that they've wanted to do. There are workbooks that can help you facilitate conversations within your own organizations and communities. And there are additional webinars, artwork, so much. We want to keep doing this all together because we think all of this incredible on the ground work, when we connect it, we are an unbeatable force. And there is so much that we can do to advance accountability that actually means something to the communities that we're trying to serve. So apologies again, accountability to us again for not allowing interaction. We will do better in the future, I promise. But thank you to everyone who made time and joined us today. And thanks most of all to our incredible panel for everything that you shared. And with that, the webinar is over.